All right, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Happy early release Thursday. Here's your do now for today. You could be any item on the Taco Bell menu. Which would you be? So go ahead and write that answer in the chat. The second and the third question will be share out loud. So the first is, what is the axis of symmetry? And how do you find it from an equation written in standard form? And how do you find the vertex from an equation written in standard form? So 3 minutes on the clock. Get your answers in the chat, and then we'll talk about it. Natalie, you don't like Taco Bell? Crazy talk, crazy talk. Chicken quesadilla, that's a good one. The freeze drink is a good one, Conrad. Clervin, you don't like Taco Bell either? Cinnamon Delights is a good one, Elise. Man, period two. I swear, once we come back in person, we're going to have a Taco Bell party. And all of you Taco Bell naysayers, I'm going to change your mind. It just hurts me deeply because Taco Bell is such an important part of my life. One more minute, one more minute. Thirty more seconds. All right, let's go ahead and get started. What is the axis of symmetry and how do you find it from an equation written in standard form? What do you have for me, Elise?
Isn't it the line on the parabola?
Mm-hmm. And how do you find it?
I don't remember.
Remember there's a specific formula to find it. Do you remember what that formula was?
No.
It's negative b over 2a, negative b over 2a. Good. All right, so how do you find the vertex from an equation written in standard form? How do you find the vertex from an equation written in standard form? What do you have for me, Henry?
For number two or number three?
Number three.
Three. You find the vertex of an equation by you use the axis of symmetry for the x value, and then for the y value. I forgot. What do you use for the y value?
You got to plug the axis of symmetry back into the.
Oh, yeah. You have to plug the axis of symmetry back into the equation.
Good job. Any questions about 2 or 3? All right. Today again is early release. If you haven't gotten a chance to look at the schedule, here it is. Y'all made it on time to second period, so I believe in you. But if you need to take a screenshot of this, go ahead. If you want to take a picture of it, go ahead. While you're doing that, we're going to go ahead and do good things. So today's good things are coming from Lexi, Nick, and Naya. Lexi, what's your good thing?
My good thing is that I was injured at the beginning of the season and I am now cleared to play this weekend.
Who are you guys playing this weekend?
We're playing Brownsburg.
Is it here or do you have to travel all the way there?
It's here.
Gotcha. Cool. Exciting. Awesome. Nick, what's your good thing?
I don't got one.
Just what's the best thing out of all the things that have happened today or yesterday?
I woke up.
That's sometimes a great thing. It's hard to wake up in the morning. Good. Thanks for sharing. And then Naya, what's your good thing?
I got a majority of my homework done, I guess.
Woo, perfect. Just in time for the weekend. Yes. Love that. My good thing is what was my good thing? Oh, I made a cake yesterday and I brought some for lunch today. So I'm gonna eat that cake and it's gonna be really good. That's my good thing. All right, we're gonna switch the order a little bit today because it's early release and I wanna make sure that we have time to do our notes. So we're gonna do the notes first. We should finish kind of early. And then I'll answer any questions that you have on your homework at the end of the period. So hang tight if you do have any questions. I'll get to them at the end of the period. You'll need 2 things today. You'll need your notes and you will need your cheat sheet from yesterday. So like I said, the cheat sheet's really helpful because we're going to be talking about a lot of formulas and a lot of information. It's sometimes hard to keep track of it all. So I highly suggest having the cheat sheet just available as you do problems, because there's no need for you to memorize all of this stuff as long as you can find the information easily. So yesterday we talked all about standard form. So that was the first column. Today we're going to be talking about vertex form, so that middle column. All the information on your cheat sheet is the same as the information on the front page of your notes. So it really doesn't matter where you look for the information, whatever's easier. I like the cheat sheet so that you don't have to keep flipping back and forth, but that's my personal preference. All right, so vertex form should look familiar because it's basically what we talked about on Tuesday. I just didn't tell you it was vertex form on Tuesday. So when we talked about transformations and the A and the H and the K, that was all based on vertex form. So the formula y equals A times x minus h squared plus k. To find the axis of symmetry in vertex form, it's actually quite easy. It's just x equals whatever the opposite of h is. So there's no math involved. You just got to find the h, take the opposite of it. That's your axis of symmetry. We talked about this on Tuesday. To find the vertex from vertex form, it's just h comma k. So just remember that you need the opposite sign for h. That's the tricky part about that. But again, no math involved. You just have to look for your h, look for your k, and that's your vertex. Maximum and minimum is the same as standard form. So you look at your a value, and if your a value is positive, you're going to have a minimum because it's going to be opening upwards, so you have the lowest point. Versus if a is negative, you're going to have a maximum because it's going to be opening downwards, so you'll have the highest point. And the y value is just the y value of the vertex. So in this particular case, it would be k. To find the y-intercept, it's a little bit more difficult than standard form. You're going to need to plug in the 0 for x, and then whatever you get is your y value. X-intercepts, domain, and range. Like I said yesterday, for virtual learning, we're not really going to go into that, so you really won't be responsible for finding information, but it's helpful to know. The X-intercept is where your graph crosses the axis, and to find that, you're going to set the equation equal to 0 and solve for X. For domain, it's just all real numbers, so you can have any X value you want. And the range, depending on whether you have a minimum or maximum, it's going to change. If you have a minimum, it's y is greater than or equal to the minimum value. If you have a maximum, it's y is less than or equal to the maximum value. But like I said, don't worry too much about X-intercepts, domain, and range. We're not really going to focus on it a ton. Just useful information to know. All right, let's get to it. So we only have 2 examples today. So as you know, I love making typos. It's part of my skill set. It says examples 1 through 4, but I actually cut out examples. So we're only doing examples 1 through 2. So don't worry if you're like scrolling through the notes and you're like, where are the rest of the examples? There's only 2 examples. All right, we got to state the vertex, the axis of symmetry, y-intercepts, max, min, and then graph this baby. So let's go with number 1, y equals x plus 3 squared plus 5. The first step that you want to do, just like yesterday, you want to identify your variables. So you want to know what your a, your h, and your k are. So I'm going to go ahead and call on someone to help me out. What's my a, what's my h, and what's my k? What do you think, Christian?
Your A is 1, your H is 3, and your K is 5.
Perfect, good job. If 1 is a little bit tricky, so if you don't see a number in front of your parentheses, you can assume that it's 1, so your A value is 1. Good job. Your vertex is always the opposite of H, so H was positive 3, so it's going to turn to a negative 3, comma K, so 5 is your K. Questions on the vertex? Your axis of symmetry is always in the format x equals. Don't forget to include x equals. If you just give me a number for axis of symmetry, I will not count it correct. You have to include the x equals. And x equals the opposite of h. So h was positive 3. So when you put it in the axis of symmetry, it should be negative 3. Y-intercept. So this one's a little bit more involved. To find the y-intercept, you need to plug in a 0 everywhere you see an x. So it's going to be 0 plus 3 squared plus 5.
I have a question.
Yes.
For the y-intercept, when we plug in, does it always have to be 0?
Yes, it always has to be 0 because for your y-intercept, it's where the graph crosses the y-axis, and so the x will always be 0 on the y-axis. So that is a given. Your x will always be 0, and then you have to plug in the 0 into the equation to find out what the y is. So in this case, it's going to be 14, so 0, comma 14. Any questions about y-intercepts? All right, the maximum and the minimum. So if you look at your cheat sheet, to find the maximum or minimum, you're going to look at the a value, and Christian said that the a value was 1, which is a positive number. So if a value is positive, you have a minimum. So I'm going to circle minimum. And then the value of that is the y value of the vertex. So the y value of the vertex was 5. So that goes there. Any questions about A through D so far before we start graphing it? All right, when you graph, always start with the vertex. So we've got -3, +5 as your vertex. But then, and the second point you want to graph y-intercept, so 0, 14. But you'll notice when you try to graph 0, 14, it doesn't actually fit on your graph, and that sometimes happens. So what do you do in that situation? I suggest doing a table of values, but we're gonna do a modified table of values. So not like what we did on Tuesday. Here's how to do a modified table of values. I know that I need at least 3 points on my graph to form a parabola. So right now I got 1 point. So I'm gonna put that vertex -3, 5 at the top of my table of values. So it should be the first entry in my table of values. And then I'm just gonna choose one number that's bigger than -3. So let's go with -2. All you need is just one number. So to find the y value, I'm gonna plug -2 back into my original equation. So it's gonna be -2 plus 3, close your parentheses, and then square it, plus 5. And that's gonna give you 6. So -2, 6. So I'm gonna go ahead and plot that. And the reason why you only need one other value on your table of values is because, remember, you're gonna draw your axis of symmetry, which goes through the vertex at x equals -3. And then you can use that axis of symmetry to just reflect this point, -2, 6, over. So it was to the right one, so it's gonna go over to the left one. And then you have enough points to make a parabola. So if you're in a situation where you can't actually graph the y-intercept, create a table of values. You just need one other point besides the vertex, and then you can use the axis of symmetry to reflect it. Any questions about the graph? Anyone need more time on this before we go on to example 2, because I'll have to shift it over? Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call on people to help me out with number 2 because I've talked a lot so far, so I wanna hear from you. We've got -4, x minus 2 squared plus 4. First question, what's my a, what's my h, and what's my k? What's my a, what's my h, what's my k? What do you got for me, Jaden?
Your A is -4. H -2. And K is 4.
What's my vertex gonna be? What's my vertex gonna be? What do you have for me, Ida?
The vertex is going to be 2, 4.
Good, and I like how you did the opposite of h, so -2 turns to a +2. Good job. What is my axis of symmetry gonna be? What's my axis of symmetry gonna be? What do you have for me, Clervins?
+2.
+2 is correct. Don't forget though, you can't just write the number. You need to make sure that you have the x equals part. Good job. Part C, the y-intercept. How do I find the y-intercept? How do I find the y-intercept? What do you have for me, Conrad?
Plug in 0 for x to get the y value.
Yep.
So
You have Conrad?
you plug it in.
Yep, so everywhere you see an x, you're gonna plug in a 0. So you've got -4 parentheses 0 minus 2, close your parentheses, squared, plus 4. And that equals -12. So the y-intercept is always 0, comma, whatever you got when you plugged in the 0. So -12, 0, comma, -12. Questions on that? All right, do I have a maximum or minimum? Do I have a maximum or minimum? What do you think? Gavin?
Is it maximum?
Yes, and why do you say maximum?
Because the A is negative.
Good job. And then what is that maximum value going to be? What is that maximum value going to be? What do you think, Natalie?
Wouldn't it be 4? -4?
Positive 4, because it's the y value of the vertex. Good. Now let's go ahead and graph it. So start with the vertex. You've got 2, 4 as the vertex. And then I would suggest trying to graph the y-intercept. So 0, -12, but you'll notice, darn, that does not fit on my graph. So if you're in that situation, you want to do a little modified table of values. Put your vertex at the top, so 2, 4. And then you want to choose a y value, or not a y value, excuse me, an x value that is bigger than 2. It doesn't matter what you choose. I'm going to go with 3. So from here, you're going to plug that in. So it's -4 parentheses 3 minus 2 squared plus 4. Let me show that to you right there. And that's going to give you 0. So 3, 0 is your next point. Right there. Now you have enough to graph. You can draw your axis of symmetry going straight through the vertex at x equals 2. And then you can use the axis of symmetry to reflect 3, 0 over. So it used to be 1 to the right, but now it's 1 to the left. And then you're going to go ahead and connect those together. And that's your parabola. Any questions on part E or any part of that problem?
So for the maximum and minimum, both examples are positive. So like what is one maximum and one is minimum?
You're not looking at the value, you're looking at the A value. So in problem number 1, the A was +1, so that's why it was a minimum. But in example 2, the A value was -4, so that's why it was a maximum. Does that make sense? Yeah, so don't worry about this value. You want to worry about the A value. That's what tells you if it's a maximum.
All right, and second question.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're writing the answer for it, do we always use a K?
Do we always use a K for which answer?
For the minimum or maximum?
Yeah, when you're dealing with vertex form, it's always K, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Does anyone still need this before I change the screen? Okay, so here's your homework assignment for tonight. You have 2.2 part 1, which is due tonight at 11:59. And then you have 2.2 part 2, which is a new assignment, and that's going to be due Friday, so tomorrow at 11:59. Are there any questions? Okay, that's all I got for you today, so feel free to log off if you have no questions. I'm going to stick around to the end of the period, so 9:43, if you want to get started on your work, or if you have any questions.